Welcome into the Zone Heads podcast. I'm Brandon. He's Zac. The Super Bowl has come and gone. We, of course, have thoughts, and the football season is over as a single tear rolls down our cheeks. Welcome in. If you're joining us live on Facebook or on Twitter, hello to you. If not, you can always enjoy these episodes on YouTube after the fact. Just search my name, search Zac's name, or you can search Zone Heads Media or the Zone Heads podcast. And of course, wherever you download your favorites. Let's pay some bills, and then we'll talk about the Super Bowl. Good thing we have someone paying the bills after the L's that Zac and I took last night. Hit us up in the comment section as well. We'll reply to you live if you are tuning in now. Looking to buy, sell, or invest in a home in Central Florida? You need a realtor who not only knows the market, but has experience in protecting your investment. Meet Kevin Crager with LPT Realty. When it comes to real estate, experience matters. Trust my guy, Kevin, to guide you every step of the way. Go ahead and give him a call, 407-702-4635. The number also on the bottom of the screen. Real estate made smart with our guy, Kevin, a realtor that you can trust. Zac, I feel pure pain this morning. I feel brain fog. I had too much to eat. I had too much to drink. I had a betting massacre. This is not easy. I'm not going to lie. Hopping on with you right now, yeah, I love talking all things round ball, oblong ball with you. I was not looking forward to this episode. This feels like ripping off the Band-Aid that's been stuck on your arm for the last week. I don't want to relive this, but I guess we have to.
Yeah, Yep. A lot of that, a lot of what you just said. I think it's interesting because heading into the Super Bowl matchup, whether you were a football fan that wasn't one of the Eagles or the Chiefs, like it just didn't have the oomph, right? That was the big chatter, I think, across the country and the globe was outside of Kansas City and Philadelphia, people just weren't amped about this. My whole thing that I still rested my laurels on was that I still thought the game was going to be a good game that had stars in it, and I was betting on it. Well, the game was a blowout, and a lot of my bets didn't hit. So, yeah, didn't love last night. And then on top of it, you're staying up late on a school night on top of it. So it's just, it was frustrating and surprising. And I'm having this chat. I'm talking to people. I know some folks relished in the fact that it's slaying the dragon. And I'm like, yeah, but it's still Philadelphia. And they were just in the Super Bowl and they've won Super Bowls. It'd be different if it was, let's just say Washington had upset Philly and they were on this crazy run and they did it. Maybe then I could be more excited, but watching last night unfold the way it did, I didn't enjoy any of it at any point. The halftime show, the game results, none of it. I just was it felt very similar to me in a different way than when the Broncos got blasted by Seattle. And that was the worst Super Bowl I remember watching.
Yeah, I think I guess the one ray of sunshine in all of this is that Jalen Hurts is very easy to cheer for. He does things the right way, as does Saquon Barkley. Those guys deserve this sort of recognition today for how good they are. So that I feel good about. Everything else sucks. I didn't lose all the wagers last night. There were some fun parlays that I slammed together. Devontae Smith and Xavier Worthy both to score a touchdown, and that happened, so that was cool. But in terms of what I put out online, which is, so not only am I taking the loss to the betting account, but also just public embarrassment. I put out a graphic. Shout out to my guy, Raf, who helps me with this in the Orlando side. Saquon Barkley, over 23.5, longest run in the game. Nope. He got to 10. Chiefs -1.5. That we'll discuss at length in a moment. Obviously did not happen. Nolan Smith, over half a sack. He actually got one, or at least his hands on one. They didn't credit him for it. They credited his teammate. Patrick Mahomes, over 29.5 yards rushing. Would have gotten it had they not been called back multiple times for holding penalties from the offensive line that was brutalized all night. And then this is my favorite bet of the whole game. Largest lead of the game, under 13.5 points. That was over before halftime. 0 for 5 with what I, quote, gave out. I mean, it's just absolute, just the last thing you want on the last.
And it's tough. It's tough. It hurts. It's painful. And what I would say too, Brandon. So, like, obviously, I was heavily on the Chiefs. I'll tell you though, from a betting perspective, I broke pretty even just because yesterday I started sprinkling in different things that weren't as reliant on the outcome of the game. Not that all the ones you said were. I remember talking to you last week. I told you I liked Juju Smith-Schuster over 1.5, and like I think it was like 19.5 yards or something small like that. He hit on those. I also had both teams scoring over 2.5 touchdowns, which the Eagles cleared pretty easily. And the thing with those, like a lot of these bets that help me kind of even out, which doesn't feel like a win. You feel like you lost even if you break even, especially on the Super Bowl. But like that was my mindset was, these aren't great value. I'm not going to get a lot of return on them, but it's almost like a safety net where if this game goes awfully the direction I don't expect it to, that I'll at least kind of find a way to not be bank account zeroed. And so I did break even, but a lot of the things I felt great about did not happen. And again, unless you were, last night was the type of game where unless you were just convinced that Philly was going to steamroll, and I know there were people out there that felt that way, you didn't probably make much, if any, money on it. And, those ones are always tough. Those are always tough.
So perhaps a lesson for the future. Every Super Bowl is different, and I think that that's something that I need to remind myself, because last week, talking to you at this exact time, I was telling you how much this Super Bowl was going to mirror the one we saw the last time these two teams played, and you said, don't do it. So credit to you. You kind of saw the trees through the forest. I did not. I thought we were going to get a very similar game, very similar statistics, and all of that. I thought we were going to get the same result too. So, I mean, I leaned into that pretty hard. Whenever there's a game of this magnitude that has this type of star power that people get excited about, just take the unders. Just take a bunch of unders and move on with your life. Saquon Barkley rushing, check. Every Chief rushing, Mahomes, Hunt, Pirine, Pacheco, all of them went under. Travis Kelce, everyone loves him, under. I mean, just A.J. Brown, just clean across the board. So that's, Jalen Hurts went over in his passing. Of course, you're going to have those that
weren't
hit
you
the
on a
other side,
Devonta
but something
Smith
to think
TD,
about.
though?
What was that?
Weren't you on a Smith touchdown, though? Didn't you have
Devonta?
Yeah,
I didn't even bet it by itself. I parlayed it with Xavier Worthy to score touchdowns. No, that was good.
Okay.
No, I didn't lose. I didn't lose everything. One of my favorites that I had.
I thought you did the way you were coming at it.
Well, I mean, it was definitely a negative night for the account, but. Yeah. The real embarrassment just came from I put a lot of this stuff out online. I make videos for RotoWire. I share that on my personal channels. I had 2 picks that I gave out. Both of them didn't hit. 5 picks that I put out for my lock segment on In the Zone, and then I share the graphic. 0 of 5 on that. So I was 0 for 7 on public plays for the Super Bowl, which is that's really where, like, it's more shame than it is a financial burden. But I had Jalen Hurts to score a touchdown in the first half. Great game plan, by the way. I went Jalen Hurts to score a touchdown in the first half, and then if he didn't hit it, I was going to live bet him in the second half at plus money. Mm-hmm. He got that one in the first half, so we were able to walk out with a win. It wasn't a total loss, but just definitely licking my wounds. And, on top of it, you eat like shit, you drink a lot. It's just, it just makes it all worse.
But the one thing I will say that both of us don't have to go through pain-wise, especially from the betting side, is we weren't people that bet Dotson to be the first touchdown scorer. Because the pain in people's hearts, and there probably wasn't a lot of folks, but there were folks in the world that definitely bet Dotson, Eagles receiver, first touchdown, and I don't know what the value was, but it had to be insane, and thought that they just broke the levee. And then he got called down at the 1, and it was a Hurts tush push. But that would have been – I mean, that had to be the most heartbreaking thing, I think, for any bettors last night, is somebody who had that.
Yeah, for sure. And I was looking at that before the game because Hard Rock had sent over a 20% profit boost for the first touchdown scorer. So, I was trying to bring Mallory, my wife, into the fold of my dark betting circles, and I said, all right, I already have all of my bets laid out there. You look at the list and you pick the first touchdown scorer. We'll have some fun with that. And I told her, cut it off at DeAndre Hopkins, who was 17-1. And Dotson was after him on the list, so he was not even considered. We had Devontae Smith to score the first touchdown. And so obviously that didn't happen. But yeah, she goes, did we get it? I was like, nah, don't. We definitely didn't even discuss that one. Let me give a little bit of love here to Jalen Hurts. Okay, enough about my betting misfortune. Okay, nobody needs to hear any more of this. This year, 17 of 22, 221 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. He also had 72 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Go back 2 years ago. He was 27 of 38, 304 through the air, a touchdown, no picks. He did have a fumble, 70 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns on the ground. So did a little bit of simple math here, Zach. How about 44 of 60 over 2 Super Bowl appearances? That's 73% completion rate. 525 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 4 rushing touchdowns, 142 yards on the ground with 2 turnovers that you will find acceptable when I just read you all of those other numbers. That's what this guy has done in 2 Super Bowl appearances. He has been amazing. He was a deserving MVP because you can't give it to the entire defensive line. He's incredible. I'm glad that he gets his flowers today, as much as it hurts.
Yeah, and straight up, he's outplayed Mahomes, I would argue, in both Super Bowls. I mean, obviously they won. This one's an easy. But, like, you look at the last game where they were locked up, and he was phenomenal. And to that point, like, that's what everybody else struggles with. That's what keeps a team like Buffalo from getting there. That's, what slowed down the Ravens at points. And obviously it's more nuanced than that. But if you can straight up outplay a guy like Mahomes head-to-head, you're a team that can beat the Chiefs. There's just not many folks who can do that. And that was one thing you and I talked about was Jalen Hurts, or we're talking about him now, but Joe Burrow, and how like Cincinnati's had this like, just we're going to punch you, we're going to beat you up attitude. And I was talking to you about this last week, how like I think that's been a huge difference maker for them. I think Philly similarly attacked things that way and had a quarterback who also stood strong, similar to what we've seen from Burrow against Kansas City. So that's the mixture. It's just awfully hard to replicate or create because Mahomes is that good. And even if you're nasty, it doesn't mean you're going to have success. But for the Eagles last night, they did. And again, Jalen, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league and an easy guy to root for on top of it.
It might be a tough conversation to have right now because we always want to bump a guy up a couple of pegs on a list after he does something like this and wins a game of this magnitude. Where do you have him in the pecking order of quarterbacks in the NFL?
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, definitely top 10, right? Like that's an easy thing to say. Yeah. I mean, Mahomes is still the best. I think you look at Burrow, you look at Allen, and you look at Lamar, the 3 guys we were talking about for MVP. I think there's a reason. I think after that, maybe it starts to get a little bit interesting. Like I would take Hurts over a guy. I'm trying to go through like Stafford, Goff, like some of the other better quarterbacks, like Jaden Daniels, obviously young, still like developing. I take him over a Justin Herbert because he's had a ton of success. Like again, I mean, off the top of the dome, I'd probably put him around that like 5 spot without kind of hardcore cementing him in there. But hey, you're a top 5 QB. You've been to 2 Super Bowls. You won 1. You got the MVP in it. And honestly, you can make an argument that maybe their dynasty is starting to roll and get ready to go with the way their roster is built and his age. So, yeah, I'd say top 5 comfortably. I would say probably not top 3, not on my list.
Yeah, you still have Mahomes, Allen, Burrow. Jackson is a better overall quarterback than Hurts is. That's 4. And then you have to make the decision on, I think it depends on how you frame this in your own mind. Am I taking a quarterback starting now and moving forward for the rest of their career? Because I think we would take Jaden Daniels ahead of him in that regard. If you're saying what you've done right now in this very moment, Jalen Hurts has to be ahead of Jaden Daniels, and then that puts him right at 5. So I would say 5 or 6. And then if you're still married to Justin Herbert because of the talent, maybe at the lowest 7. So that does feel like that's the exact range. Hurts is somewhere between 5 and 7 on the list.
Quick pause, sidebar, because this is a big
boy.
part of our friendship. So you just took a stray shot at Justin Herbert there. I felt that. So if you're going to be like, oh, I guess if you have to put him this place in the top, where's Tua at in the top 10 there, buddy?
He's not in it.
Okay, I just want to clarify because this goes back to our Herbert to a draft day conversation. And look, Herbert, he's definitely, I think, the most polarizing guy right now in the top 10 because I think you can make an argument for him to be out of the top 10 altogether. And I think there's people who look at the talent and have him closer to the 5 spot, just depending on how you feel about him.
Yeah, if there was a draft, if we redrafted the league right now, I think GMs would take Justin Herbert over Jalen Hurts. I still think, at the end of the day, as great as Jalen Hurts was, the Chiefs' game plan was we want you to throw. And that's not usually the thought process for the great quarterbacks in the league is we're daring you to throw the football. So keep that in mind. Now, Jalen Hurts, that was the game plan against them, and he executed what he had to do to perfection and has now really done that in 2 Super Bowls. So I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but you do have to keep that in mind when you have these nuanced conversations about rankings that a lot of those guys, you wouldn't go into a game against Joe Burrow and go, we want him to throw the football. No, you don't. And with Jalen Hurts, you do.
Yeah, but again, there's examples there of him being able to overcome it, including last night in the Super Bowl. So I get what you're saying, but we've made that argument about quarterbacks similar to him in the past, and then they crumble in those situations. I think with Jalen, obviously, you can't say that about him, at least, how consistent that is. We'd have to kind of go back and look at it when he's not really able to run the ball. Saquon had an amazing year. But I think for Hurts, the feather in his cap, and we're still talking about Lamar in that capacity, as great as he is. Like, if you take away rushing altogether, like, what are the Ravens doing? We're not really talking about that with Hurts as much now that they're Super Bowl champs.
Yeah, I mean, where do you put Kenny Pickett on the list too? Because I mean, he closed out the game for Philadelphia, so something to keep in mind.
This guy, I got nothing. I would have loved to see Carson Wentz get in there for Kansas City. If we were going to see any backup last night, it would have been right? Who they have?
Yeah, Carson Wentz. Yeah, they showed Mahomes chopping it up with Wentz at points, and I did think to myself, I wonder if they're going to put Wentz in at any moment in this game, but I don't think Mahomes would have had that. How about this? I had spent $5 to upgrade my YouTube TV account to 4K last night because I went, if we're going to watch this game, you got to watch it in the highest quality possible. So upgrade it. I got to see all of these L's that I took in crystal clear 4K. I already went in.
$5? Could you tell the difference?
Slightly. It's not worth $10 a month, but it was something.
Okay.
Where do you want to go from here? Because I have a couple of different notes from where, going into the game.
Freezing here. Freezing.
Oh, okay. You're cold. Okay. Zach is cold in the moment. Mahomes versus Fangio is a big storyline going into this one, and Mahomes had owned this guy, and so perhaps one of the if you were a newspaper columnist, if you were somebody who created headlines, Fangio's revenge would have been a good next day headline for this one. This guy straight up said, "I'm not going to blitz you once, and I'm going to straight up beat you." Zach, are you checked back in as far as your connection goes?
I think so. Does it seem like it? I got Microsoft Teams is trying to pull me in. I'm like, I'm busy. Leave me alone. I got things going on. You were talking about the defense, the D-line for Philly, and not really needing to rush Mahomes, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I called the perhaps the.
I mean, listen. Yeah, I think Brandon too. This goes back to, and we talked about this with Barkley and just looking at the Philly roster, but look at how it's constructed. Like they've been able to get all these Georgia defensive linemen back in from the draft. That's like strong roster building. Brandon Graham has fended off retirement multiple times. Like that's leadership. they've just created it in a way. You get Sweat in there. Like I just give them a lot of credit for building it in all the different ways to where you don't. And remember, they had Hassan Reddick too. They let him walk. Like it's just built in a way where they have so many studs from different types of like ways to bring them in. Like you can get home that way. When you can do that, it allows the second your linebackers and everybody else to just play freely.
I mean, the goal of a guy to say we're not going to blitz you once throughout the course of the Super Bowl and just attack you with our 4 down linemen, and that was the difference in the game. That's why if you could give anybody the MVP, it would just be the D line of Philadelphia. They were dropping guys back into coverage all night, and Mahomes looked so flustered by it. Those two turnovers that he had early in that game, those were entirely on him. And those are such uncharacteristic plays from a guy that has been as good and as clutch as Patrick Mahomes. One of the things that I was thinking about too, when I like to look at things through the psychology lens. Okay. There's a comparison here to be made between what the Chiefs just went through and what the Patriots went through several years ago when they were undefeated going into a game against the New York Giants. These guys like Mahomes and Brady, they operate on a different level where the pressure of the moment doesn't get to them the way that it does for other players. But I think what we discount is that even for the greats, there is still an added layer of pressure that you put on yourself, that your teammates put on themselves when you're chasing history. The Patriots weren't the same in a game where they had won every regular season game leading up to that game against the Giants, and they crumbled. The Chiefs had won 2 Super Bowls in a row and had done something that no other team had done in getting back for the three-peat, and they crumbled. Even for the greats, and it should make you appreciate the Jordans and the Kobes of the world who were able to overcome that mental hurdle, because even for the greatest out there, there is still an incentive to be reached that psychs you out. And I think that has something to do with what we saw from Kansas City. I don't think mentally they could handle that moment. And not a lot of people even get the opportunity to put themselves in that position. And they did, and they couldn't handle it.
Yeah. And I wonder, and I'll kind of like get your thoughts on this, like how much of that is permeating from a guy like Mahomes out to the rest of the team? Because I mean, you look at, obviously, anytime they tried to run the ball, they got to the line of scrimmage and were stuffed. And it was similar for Philly a lot of times too, just to point that out. But you had Kelsey dropping footballs. You had Hopkins dropping footballs. Like they just looked like a team that wasn't mentally sharp and fully engaged. And I wonder if it's like those things that led to Mahomes kind of like pressing and making mistakes, or the other way around where Mahomes was more rattled and it looked human. And then maybe that kind of led to his guys also feeling that, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know which way it went, but I would argue that collectively that environment was fully for all of the Chiefs. And I think you could see that really at every level, every position on offense.
Yeah, I think it's got to be one of these two. Either they were finally fat and happy and satisfied with their standing as NFL players, as a team, because they'd won back-to-back Super Bowls and everybody's been singing their praises for years and calling them a dynasty recently, at least after the last Super Bowl against San Francisco. And there's a little bit of overconfidence that comes with that. Or the other side of it, where it felt like when you're up against history, it's really, really tough to overcome that mental hurdle. The Eagles are out there trying to win a game. Mm-hmm. They're trying to win the biggest game of the year. The Chiefs are out there trying to beat history. And if you allow that to seep into your mind in that moment, I think you play outside of yourself. We've watched a lot of Chiefs games this year. They do look sloppy at times, but they don't get bullied. That doesn't happen. And the Eagles have the personnel to do it, but you still didn't think, even going into that game, knowing how good the Eagles are at literally every single position on the football field, you still didn't think that they would be capable of doing that because the Chiefs are ready for the moment. And for the first time ever watching this team, they didn't feel like they were ready. So there has to be some mental aspect to that because it wasn't like them. They didn't. I'm not shocked that they lost. I'm shocked that they were owned from the beginning until the very end of that game.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think a lot of people felt that way about it. I mean, it was crazy to watch it unravel that way. And I know it was interesting to have Tom Brady on the call. I think regardless of like dissecting and giving him a grade and like talking about how he did, it was so cool to have a guy with the experience he does talking about a guy like Mahomes, who's also chasing history, and then watching Mahomes look so human and having Brady in the booth, like, yeah, he ain't me. Like, even though Brady's like lost, obviously to the Eagles in a Super Bowl as well. And he wasn't perfect, but I think Brady lost 3 Super Bowls by like a combined 15 points, give or take. Mahomes has lost 2 Super Bowls by like 40, something like that. So it was such a reminder of the greatness that Tom brought. And that's why another reason whenever we talk about the GOAT, and everybody's like, well, look at Mahomes, where he's at right now. And I'm like, yeah, but half of what makes Tom the GOAT is the longevity and when he did it on the second half and even the third chapter of his career up or down at Tampa Bay. For Mahomes to be on that level, there's such a long way to go, and things like this can happen. And then all of a sudden, you're not having those chats. I think more people today are talking about, is the Eagles dynasty starting with their roster and how it's set up than they are, is Patrick Mahomes going to catch Tom Brady? And I think that that's a fair chat to kind of shift to based on what we know.
There aren't many people that took a bigger win last night that weren't on the field than Tom Brady. Tom Brady was basically trending for his
Seal took the biggest win. Seal took the biggest win as a Seal. Seal as a Seal.
I want to know the percentage of the audience that knew that was Seal as a Seal. I want to know where we were at with that.
I think I give people credit. I think a good amount of people knew. Everybody I talked to was freaking out about that, myself included. I loved it. I think people knew.
One other football note, and then I guess we can close with you ranting. I know you didn't like the halftime show, based on reading your social media commentary. The biggest loser last night that wasn't on the football field has to be the Buffalo Bills. You couldn't beat that version of the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, that team is screwed that they can't even beat this version of Kansas City. They looked so bad last night. And you know that Kansas City is going to take this personally. They're about to go wild in the offseason. Watch KC try and revamp this roster. I worry about Buffalo moving forward, that they couldn't take down this Kansas City team.
Yeah, no, and I think that was a chat that a lot of folks were having heading into this matchup. Is like, oh, I wish it was like Bills or something like that instead. And again, now you've seen the Eagles and Hurts overcome Kansas City, and we're talking about like their dynamic. Well, you got to look back in the AFC with the Bills, with the Ravens, these other rosters that are stacked and just can't handle Patrick Mahomes, period, and the Chiefs, regardless of what version you get. So it's tough, man. And I think looking, obviously, hindsight, but even heading into it, I think we all would have preferred the Bills to be in there outside of Kansas City fans. But even after the shellacking, I think even Kansas City fans might say, looking at it, like, yeah, I kind of wish Buffalo was in there instead.
All right, let's wrap today's chat with some entertainment talk. I like about going into yesterday, I could say confidently I liked about 3 at the most Kendrick Lamar songs. That might have even been pushing it. And I really like the few that I know, but I just don't listen to Kendrick Lamar's catalog all that often. Going into yesterday, when I was driving around, I went out of my way to pull up the Essentials playlist of Kendrick Lamar on Apple, and I fell in love with a few more songs. So my catalog of what I enjoyed from Kendrick Lamar was expanding as the day progressed, because I really wanted to enjoy the halftime show. He performed the songs that I was into, and so I knew watching it people were going to hate this, but I enjoyed it for what it was. I don't think, and I never did, that he's the best option to go with, just based on how limited I would think most people's knowledge of his catalog would be, and that's kind of what the halftime shows should be. Rihanna is a good example of the type of artist that you want to go with, where she's got like 10 hits that everybody knows the words to. But I liked it. Your thoughts, Zach? Oh, you're going to freeze up on me at a time like this.
Well, I know I'm getting chopped. I know. I'm getting real choppy here. I don't know what's going on. I think Apple Music's trying to shut me down. Um, yeah, I don't know how much of this you're getting because again, it is choppy. But I like. Let me see if I can just get this out there. I like Kendrick Lamar. I like his songs. I've listened to him. I've seen performances of his at big events where he was electric, where it was awesome. I did not feel that way last night of him being out there. It felt like literally a halftime show that was based on him dunking on Drake, which is like cool for a second, but that's not what I want during a Super Bowl halftime show. I don't need you to, you already won the beef in most people's eyes. Like, you're at the Super Bowl. I get that you're going to take some shots. Like, that's fine. But that seemed like that was all of the pop, was like, oh, I'm Kendrick Lamar, and I'm just going to constantly take shots at Drake to like rub it in. Cool. Okay. That doesn't provide like entertainment for the majority of people watching, in my opinion. There's people that are going to look at it and be like, oh, like all I care about is the culture. Like that was phenomenal. Like you wouldn't get it. You're unseasoned. Like that's just BS. Like that's not time or place to do, I think, that type of performance in the capacity that he did. I like Samuel L. Jackson. I like the choreographed flag like outfits and like how that kind of came to be. But I just like overall, it was a very flat performance. That was centered specifically around dunking on Drake. So it's not specific that I don't like Kendrick or that I don't think he's a good performer, because those are not true. I just thought tonight, in that capacity of what he was supposed to be doing, it was awful situation. Like I didn't think it was entertaining. And it's not just about me or you, it's about everybody that's watching. And I feel like they just missed the mark.
Well, as far as anti-Kendrick Lamar halftime show takes go, that's about as good as it gets. I don't think you're going to hear a better take than, and I'm biased because I like Zac, but I don't think I would tell him if he was wrong. For people that didn't like it, that's about as good an opinion as you're going to hear out there, because I think most of the anti-halftime show folks are going to give you a different spin. I appreciate what you just put together. That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Zoneheads podcast, presented by Kevin Crager of LPT Realty. When it comes to real estate, experience matters. Trust Kevin to guide you every step of the way. Call him at 407-702-4635. Please subscribe to the channel that you are viewing us on right now. You can also catch us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Yes, they're going to keep us on Apple, even though Zac was just crapping on the halftime show. We're back at it next week. What will we talk about? Only God knows. I'm Brandon. He's Zac, and we'll chat soon, Zoneheads.